Hello, welcome back to another episode of Women Think Bigger. I'm Sonia, and today we're going to talk about a subject that is particularly dear to my heart because I know that so many of you in the community have struggled with it, and it has to do with reconciling intuition and logic and seeing them both as really important tools to succeed in business. We're going to explore how to reconcile both of these aspects and how to see yourself and assume the identity of a successful entrepreneur. So, if you feel like sometimes it's hard for you to navigate between your intuition and logic and knowing when to use them, we're going to see how to use these tools on a daily basis in the business and how to reconcile both things that many people consider as opposite. The left part of our brain, the left hemisphere, is all about reasoning, analytical thinking, and complex information processing, while the right part of our brain, the right hemisphere, is all about creativity, imagination, art, and intuition as well. And even though we know nowadays that your intuition is not just coming from the brain, but also from the body and namely the gut, these are mainly the distinctions that we make in the right and left hemisphere that really see where we use intuition and where we use more our creativity and our imagination. So beyond the logical distinction of both, I always feel like in life, these are seen as sort of opposites. People either qualify themselves as very logical or very intuitive, or maybe you have in the past labeled yourself as a logical person versus an intuitive person. And so you either embody the identity of the logical one or the intuitive one, which is also sometimes the more out there kind of vibes. And for many years, I found myself struggling between both identities. For example, in the early years in my career, when I was in corporate environments and surrounded by my colleagues, it was easier for me to tap into this logical side of me. And I felt that somehow I was kind of hiding the intuitive nudges or the more out of the box ideas that I had because I didn't feel really comfortable expressing this side of me, using this intuitive part of me to make decisions as a manager. And so I was leaning way more into the logical side. And this is how I was presenting myself as well to my colleagues, as a very logical person. And on the other side, when I found myself around people that were more connected to themselves, to their intuition, it was easier for me to let that side of me shine, to even connect with myself, sometimes even pulling oracle cards for fun. Like I wasn't feeling weird anymore. And I also experienced this very distinct difference between both in my own family, because my dad, as a university teacher, was very leaning into rational thinking. And on the other side, my mom was more connected to the mind body connection. She was leading more into her intuition. So there was this very two different sides of me, and I was struggling to actually know which one I was leaning in the most and which one I had to use when I started building my business. What I realized is that when I was leaning into either my logical side or my intuitive side, I was doing it from a place of conditioning mostly. So in the early years of my business, I was more following the rules, but I was starting to feel a sort of sense of rebellion when I was not listening to my intuition. But it wasn't coming from a grounded place. It was more a reaction to not wanting to be the good sheep and just to follow the rules. I was immediately reacting and just pulling back to my intuition and forgetting completely about the logical side. And other times I was leaning more into the logical side because I was afraid of being seen as too woo or not being taken seriously as an entrepreneur, especially when it came to matters of business and matters of money. So I was juggling a lot with both energies, but each time it came more from a place of reacting and conditioning than from a grounded place of making business decision using both sides. So I'm sharing all of that in my personal story just to tell you that whether you experience exactly the same or not, it's likely that at some point you just struggle with owning both of these identities anyway as an entrepreneur. And you felt like you were either the logical one or the intuitive one in business. So then with time, I started healing everything and everything came into balance because I really realized that although we don't see it much out there in business, both of them are not opposites and they're actually a joint force when you know how to use them together. And not only they go hand in hand together, but they also expand each other. That is why when I talk about logic and intuition, I like to say it's a reconciliation of two old friends because this is how it felt for me. And that simple shift was such a game changer for me that it became part of my mission with Women Think Bigger, because it allowed me for the first time to be the whole expression of me, to be all of me, and starting to do business from a very different place than what I've seen in the traditional teachings and learnings. And I know that a lot of people in this community are very driven, ambitious entrepreneur who tap into their logical side, but they also crave a space where we use our intuition to know what's best for our business. We know how to trust ourselves more. And we ultimately do business in a very different way. So when those two energies collide, this is where quantum leaps happen, because you don't have to suppress any of them to be successful in business. So I want to tell you that you don't need to appear more logical to be more credible in your business. And at the same time, you don't have to run away from your intuition when you need to make really big business decision, because actually your intuition is your shortcut also to your success. And then your logical mind will know how to execute the plan that comes from your intuition. So to get to the success that you desire, it is crucial for you to follow your intuition and then let your logical mind help you plan and execute the vision. So today is more of an invitation for you to see how these patterns have played out in your life. When was it hard for you to lean more into the feminine energy of the intuition? And when did you feel that you were rushing too much to the masculine energy of just doing and following logic? Because it's important to see if there are any fears that arise when you think of being more intuitive, or maybe when you think of leaning more into the logical side of you. We need to really observe whether we are in balance or whether we are out of alignment with one of the two energies. And you'll notice if you're out of balance when every business decision is always made from a masculine energy of just logic. And you'll also notice if you're out of balance with the feminine, if you never use logic to plan or to execute, and it's just always coming from a place of intuition. So to close out this episode, I just want to give you a very quick practical tips of seeing where is the ideal balance between both energies when it comes to business decision, what it could look like when it's balanced. Well, when you choose to deciding what is your next offer, an ideal balance between both would be leaning into your intuition to know what you create, and then maybe validate it if you need to do it by data. It's not always the case, but it's just an example of seeing how both energies can merge, and the intuition being more in the feminine side and the data and, for example, the service, the feedback could be more into the masculine energy. When you're setting business goals and targets, an example of leaning only into the masculine energy would be only having revenue goals. And an example of being only in the feminine would be more leaning into only embodiment and desired feeling. And then a balanced energy would be both setting a target and a revenue goal while embodying the identity and while also embodying the feeling of that person that already has this level of success that you want. And then we can take a last example, which is, for example, when you plan your schedule. If you're always in a masculine energy, it means you only look at structure and you only look at planning in your days. And if you're only in the feminine, it means you're only going to flow depending on how you feel during the day. And the idea, for example, for a balanced energy of both would be having a structure, but also letting yourself flow depending on how you feel, if you have creative inspiration, if you need to rest. So it would be having a structure, but also adjusting it depending on how you feel daily. So these are just really quick examples. There are much more in business. There are many more opportunities to balance both energies, but I hope this episode gave you an idea of why we don't need to oppose those two forces, because they're really what makes us successful entrepreneurs, knowing when to tap into our logical side and knowing when to use our intuition. So let me know how this resonates for you right now, how you feel in the comments. And if you resonated with today's video, you're welcome to check the links to see more of the offer and the courses around this topic. And I wish you an amazing day.